He smirked at the quiet woman standing in cheap shoes beneath the crystal chandeliers, believing he was about to throw her out in front of New York's elite guests, never realizing that within the next 10 minutes, the entire luxury hotel would be begging for her forgiveness. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The Grand Celestia Hotel stood like a palace of gold and glass in the center of Manhattan, its 40-foot marble lobby glowing beneath enormous crystal chandeliers, while soft piano music floated through the air like expensive perfume. Men in tailored tuxedos laughed beside women wrapped in designer gowns worth more than most people's monthly salaries. Champagne glasses clinked. Camera flashes sparkled near the ballroom entrance. Every inch of the hotel whispered power, money, and status. And standing quietly near the revolving front door, holding a worn brown suitcase with one hand, was Claire Whitmore. She looked nothing like the wealthy guests surrounding her. Her beige coat was simple. Her hair rested loosely against her shoulders after a long cross-country flight from Denver. There was no jewelry on her wrists, no designer purse, no security team, just calm blue eyes that quietly scanned the massive lobby while exhausted travelers brushed past her. Several guests glanced at her briefly before looking away with silent judgment. At the center of the lobby stood Ethan Caldwell, the hotel's sharply dressed VIP hospitality manager. His dark suit looked perfectly tailored, his silver name tag polished like a trophy beneath the lights. Ethan loved power. More importantly, he loved making sure everyone else knew he had it. The moment he spotted Claire walking toward the private restaurant entrance, his expression changed. Not anger. Worse, amusement. The kind that came from believing someone didn't belong. Claire approached the velvet rope calmly. "Good evening," she said softly. "I have a reservation under Whitmore." Ethan barely looked at the tablet in his hand before smiling coldly. "The Aurora Dining Lounge is reserved for VIP guests only." Claire nodded once. "Yes, that's why I booked ahead." A nearby couple exchanged smirks while sipping wine. Ethan finally looked her up and down slowly, his eyes lingering on the old suitcase beside her shoes. "Ma'am," he said, lowering his voice just enough to sound insulting without raising suspicion. "Our VIP guests usually arrive a little differently." A few people nearby laughed quietly. Claire remained still. No anger, no embarrassment, just silence. Ethan tapped his tablet again, then frowned suddenly. For half a second, something strange flashed across the screen. Private executive access. His eyebrows tightened. Then the message disappeared. Ethan gave a small scoff, assuming the system had glitched. "I'm afraid there's no table available for you tonight," he said firmly. Claire looked directly into his eyes for the first time. Calm, steady, almost unreadable. "Are you absolutely certain about that?" she asked quietly. Ethan smiled wider and reached toward the velvet rope. "Security may need to escort you out if this becomes difficult." And at that exact moment, the private executive elevator behind him suddenly opened. The polished chrome doors of the private executive elevator slid open with a soft metallic chime that briefly silenced the nearest conversations in the lobby. But before anyone could step out, Ethan Caldwell quickly moved in front of Claire Whitmore with an irritated smile, determined to regain control of the situation before attention shifted away from him. "I think there has been some misunderstanding here," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "The Aurora Lounge is reserved for our highest-tier clients, not walk-in travelers looking for special treatment." Several people standing near the velvet rope exchanged amused looks. One man in a navy tuxedo chuckled into his whiskey glass while a blonde woman beside him whispered, "This is getting uncomfortable." Claire remained, perfectly calm beneath the glow of the chandeliers. She rested one hand lightly on the handle of her suitcase and spoke in the same steady tone. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I already have a reservation." Ethan gave a dramatic nod as if humoring a child. "Of course. And I suppose the system magically gave you executive clearance too?" A few nearby guests laughed quietly again. The sound echoed against the marble floors in sharp little bursts of cruelty. Claire did not react. That silence irritated Ethan even more because it denied him the satisfaction of seeing embarrassment on her face. Behind the front desk, a young hotel associate named Lily Mercer glanced nervously between them. Lily had worked at the Grand Celestia for less than 6 months, and something about the situation felt wrong to her. She had seen entitled guests scream at staff before, but this woman was different. Claire's posture never changed. Her eyes never darted nervously around the room. She stood there with the composure of someone completely certain she belonged. Lily quietly checked the reservation system from her terminal, and the moment the name Whitmore appeared, her expression tightened. A small gold icon flashed beside the profile, something she had only seen during executive training videos. Before she could speak, Ethan shot her a warning look. "Do not waste your time," he muttered under his breath. "It is obviously fake." Claire calmly reached into her coat pocket and removed a black reservation card embossed with the silver crest of the hotel. Ethan stared at it for half a second before scoffing again. "You know, counterfeit membership cards are actually a serious issue in luxury hospitality." The tension in the lobby deepened. Even the piano player near the restaurant entrance slowed uncertainly as more guests began watching openly now. Some lifted phones discreetly. Others whispered behind raised champagne glasses. Claire looked directly at Ethan. "You still have time to handle this professionally." Ethan smiled coldly. Professionally? He stepped closer to the velvet rope and raised his voice further. "Professionalism also means protecting our guests from people pretending to have status they clearly do not possess." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lily's face paled. She glanced again at the executive symbol flashing on her monitor. Her fingers trembled slightly above the keyboard. "Mr. Caldwell," she whispered carefully, "maybe we should contact upper management before making assumptions." Ethan turned sharply toward her. "Are you questioning my judgment in front of guests?" Lily immediately fell silent. The room grew tense again. Claire slowly folded the black reservation card back into her coat pocket. Her expression remained unreadable. Then Ethan made the decision that would change the entire night. He motioned toward the security desk across the lobby and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Bring her identification to the front counter. If she truly belongs here, she will not mind proving it publicly." The moment Ethan Caldwell demanded public identification, the atmosphere inside the Grand Celestia hotel shifted from quiet tension into open spectacle. Conversation slowed across the marble lobby as more guests turned toward the velvet rope, sensing entertainment in someone else's humiliation. Claire Whitmore stood perfectly still beneath the chandelier light, while 2 uniformed security officers approached from across the lobby. Their polished shoes echoed softly against the marble floor, drawing even more attention. A man near the cocktail bar lifted his phone higher, pretending to text while secretly recording. Nearby, a young social media influencer wearing a silver designer dress whispered excitedly to her friend, "This is unbelievable." She actually tried to bluff her way into the executive lounge. Her friend laughed quietly. "At this hotel? Not a chance." Ethan straightened his jacket with visible satisfaction. The situation had become exactly what he wanted: public, controlled, and impossible for Claire to escape gracefully. "Ma'am," one security officer said politely, "Mr. Caldwell is requesting verification before allowing access to private areas." Claire slowly looked at the officer, not Ethan. "And if I refuse?" she asked calmly. Ethan folded his arms. "Then unfortunately, we will assume the reservation was fraudulent." The word fraudulent spread through nearby whispers almost immediately. Claire noticed the reactions around her without changing expression. Some guests looked uncomfortable now, but most simply watched with curiosity, the way wealthy people often watched problems they believed would never happen to them. Lily Mercer remained frozen behind the front desk. She had quietly reopened Claire's reservation profile, and the same gold executive symbol continued blinking beside the Whitmore name. But now another detail appeared beneath it in bold letters: Board Priority Access. Lily swallowed hard. During training, managers had been warned never to interfere with guests carrying that designation unless direct authorization came from corporate leadership. She glanced toward Ethan, wanting to speak again, but fear stopped her. Ethan was popular with upper management. Challenging him publicly could destroy her position at the hotel. Claire finally reached into her coat pocket again. Slowly, carefully, She removed a slim leather wallet and handed over her identification without protest. Ethan grabbed it before security could. He looked at the card briefly, then let out a short laugh loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Denver," he said mockingly. "You flew all the way from Colorado for this." A few people smiled again. Ethan shook his head dramatically. "You know what usually happens in places like this?" he continued. "People see luxury online and think confidence alone can get them through the door." Claire calmly took back her identification. "Confidence is not what brought me here." Ethan smirked. "Then maybe you should explain what did." For the first time, Claire's eyes drifted briefly toward the private executive elevator behind him. The chrome doors remained closed now, reflecting the massive chandelier above like silver mirrors. Then she answered softly, "I do not think you are important enough for that explanation." The words landed quietly, but the effect was immediate. Several guests exchanged stunned looks. Ethan's smile disappeared. Even the security officers looked uneasy. Lily stared at Claire in shock because the woman's tone carried no anger at all. It carried certainty. Ethan stepped closer, his face tightening beneath the warm golden lights. "That attitude is exactly why people like you do not belong here," he said sharply. Then his eyes landed on the worn brown suitcase beside Claire's feet. "In fact," he added loudly, "before security escorts you out, I think everyone deserves to know whether you even have the ability to pay for the reservation you claim to book." He turned toward the front desk and raised his voice across the lobby. "Run her card publicly. Right now." The entire lobby of the Grand Celestia Hotel seemed to lean forward the moment Ethan Caldwell ordered Claire Whitmore's payment information to be checked publicly. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead, while dozens of wealthy guests watched openly now, no longer pretending not to stare. The piano music near the restaurant entrance faded into uncertainty, and even the servers carrying silver trays slowed their steps as tension spread across the marble floor. Claire stood alone at the velvet rope with one hand resting lightly on her old suitcase, surrounded by eyes filled with judgment. Ethan extended his hand impatiently. "Your card, ma'am." His tone was no longer polite. It carried the sharp confidence of a man completely certain he had already won. Claire calmly removed a simple black credit card from her wallet and handed it to him without argument. Ethan glanced at the plain design and smirked immediately. "No platinum insignia," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Interesting." Soft laughter moved through the crowd again. The influencer in the silver dress had fully turned her phone camera toward Claire now, quietly live-streaming the humiliation to thousands of viewers online. Comments flashed rapidly across her screen while she whispered dramatically to her audience. She tried to bluff her way into executive dining at the Grand Celestia. "This is insane." Lily Mercer watched from behind the front desk with growing dread. Her eyes darted repeatedly toward the blinking executive warning still flashing across Claire's reservation profile. "Board priority access." The words refused to disappear. Lily finally gathered enough courage to step closer. "Mr. Caldwell," she said carefully, keeping her voice low, "maybe we should pause until someone from corporate confirms this." Ethan barely looked at her. Corporate does not need to confirm common sense. Then he handed Claire's card toward the payment terminal at the front counter. A strange silence settled across the lobby as the machine processed the information. For one brief second, nobody moved. Then the screen flashed a gold symbol before abruptly freezing. Ethan frowned. The machine restarted itself automatically. Guests began whispering again. "Did it decline?" someone quietly asked near the cocktail bar. Ethan forced a laugh. "Apparently, even the payment system is confused tonight." Claire remained completely calm. Her blue eyes drifted slowly across the room, taking in every face, every whisper, every expression of amusement. She looked neither ashamed nor angry. That composure began making some people uncomfortable. The silence around her felt heavier now, almost deliberate. Ethan handed the card back with exaggerated disappointment. "Unfortunately," he announced loudly, "without proper authorization or proof of status, I cannot allow access to the Aurora Lounge." He gestured toward the revolving doors behind her. "I am going to ask you to leave the property." The words echoed harder than he expected. A hush fell across the marble lobby. Even guests who had laughed earlier suddenly shifted awkwardly. Claire slowly took back her card and slipped it into her coat pocket. Then she looked directly at Ethan with a calmness so steady it almost unsettled him. "Do you know the dangerous thing about power?" she asked softly. Ethan gave a dry smile. "Please enlighten me." Claire's voice remained gentle. "People become so addicted to feeling important that they stop recognizing dignity when it is standing right in front of them." The room went silent. No glasses clinked. No one laughed. Even the pianist stopped touching the keys. Ethan's jaw tightened beneath the chandelier light. For half a second, uncertainty flickered behind his confident expression, but pride pushed it away. He straightened his jacket again and motioned firmly toward the hotel entrance. "Escort her outside," he ordered the security officers. Claire nodded once, quietly accepting the humiliation without resistance. Then, as she slowly reached for the handle of her worn suitcase and turned toward the massive revolving doors beneath the cold Manhattan rain outside, the private executive elevator behind Ethan chimed for the second time that night. Claire Whitmore slowly pulled her worn suitcase across the polished marble floor while the two security officers walked several feet behind her, not aggressively, but close enough to remind everyone in the lobby that she was being removed. The Grand Celestia Hotel had returned to quiet conversation again, yet the atmosphere felt different now. The laughter from earlier sounded weaker, uneasy. Some guests avoided looking directly at Claire as she passed. Others still stared openly, clinging to the comfort of believing people could always be measured by appearance. Ethan Caldwell remained beside the velvet rope with his hands folded confidently in front of him, watching Claire move toward the revolving doors beneath the cold Manhattan rain outside. He believed the moment was over. He believed the hotel had been protected from embarrassment. But Claire walked with a calm dignity that somehow made the enormous luxury lobby feel smaller around her. Halfway to the entrance, she stopped briefly beside a large framed black and white photograph hanging near the concierge desk. It showed the original Grand Celestia Hotel from nearly 40 years earlier, before the billion-dollar renovations, before the celebrity galas and executive investors. The old building looked modest in the photograph. Human. Claire's eyes softened for the first time that night. Lily Mercer quietly approached her from behind the concierge desk, nervous enough that her hands trembled slightly. "Ms. Whitmore," she whispered carefully, making sure Ethan could not hear. "I am very sorry for what happened." Claire turned toward the young employee with gentle surprise. Lily looked barely 23 years old, overwhelmed by guilt and fear at the same time. "You tried to stop it," Claire said softly. Lily lowered her eyes. "Not enough." For a brief moment, the noise of the hotel faded beneath the distant sound of rain tapping against the glass entrance doors. Claire glanced back toward the old photograph again. "My father used to bring me here when I was a little girl," she said quietly. Lily looked up in surprise. Claire smiled faintly, almost lost in memory now. "Back then, this hotel had a small bakery near the lobby. Nothing fancy. He worked construction 12 hours a day, but once every year on my birthday, he saved enough money to bring me here for hot chocolate and cheesecake." Lily listened silently. Claire's voice never shook, but emotion rested quietly beneath every word. "He used to tell me something I never forgot," she continued. "He said the true value of a place is not the marble or the chandeliers. It is how people inside choose to treat strangers." Lily glanced nervously toward Ethan across the lobby. "I do not think your father would recognize this place anymore," she admitted softly. Claire's eyes drifted once more across the glittering room filled with wealth and judgment. "Neither do I." The words carried no bitterness. Somehow that made them even heavier. Lily swallowed hard. "Why did tonight matter so much to you?" Claire rested her hand gently against the handle of her suitcase. "Because tomorrow would have been his 72nd birthday." The room seemed quieter after that confession, as if even the hotel itself had paused for a second. Near the bar, a few guests who overheard the conversation slowly looked away in discomfort. Claire gave Lily a reassuring smile. "Do not let cruel people convince you kindness is weakness." Lily's eyes watered slightly. Before she could answer, a deep mechanical rumble suddenly echoed outside the hotel entrance. Several guests near the windows turned instinctively toward the street. Headlights swept across the rain-soaked glass as 3 black executive SUVs pulled sharply to the curb one after another. The revolving doors began turning rapidly. Then the entire mood inside the Grand Celestia Hotel changed. Rainwater shimmered across the Manhattan sidewalk as the line of black executive SUVs settled. silently in front of the Grand Celestia Hotel. The engines remained running, low and steady beneath the sound of distant thunder. Inside the lobby, conversations slowly faded one by one as guests turned toward the entrance with growing curiosity. The revolving doors spun open, and four individuals in dark tailored coats stepped inside with the calm precision of people accustomed to being obeyed without needing to raise their voices. Their arrival was not loud or theatrical. That was what made it powerful. One of the security officers near Claire instinctively straightened his posture. Several hotel employees exchanged uneasy glances. Ethan Caldwell frowned slightly, confused by the sudden shift in energy moving across the marble lobby. Then a fifth figure entered through the revolving doors. Margaret Holloway. Even at 65 years old, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades inside boardrooms where billion-dollar decisions were made in silence. Her silver hair rested neatly against a dark cashmere coat still touched with rain from outside. She did not rush. She did not smile. Yet the moment several employees recognized her, panic flickered visibly across their faces. One concierge nearly dropped a tray of champagne glasses. Ethan's confident expression tightened immediately. "Ms. Holloway," he said, forcing surprise into a professional smile. Margaret barely acknowledged him. Her sharp eyes scanned the lobby once, taking in the frozen guests, the security officers, Lily's frightened expression, and finally Claire Whitmore standing quietly near the entrance with one hand resting on her suitcase. For the first time all night, warmth touched Margaret's face. "Claire," she said softly. The room went still. Not quiet. Still. Ethan blinked rapidly. "You know her?" he asked carefully. Margaret looked at him now, and the temperature in the lobby seemed to drop several degrees. "Know her?" she repeated calmly. Claire offered a faint smile. "You are late, Margaret." A few nervous guests laughed weakly, unsure whether they were witnessing a misunderstanding or something far more dangerous. Margaret stepped toward Claire and noticed the suitcase beside her, the rain outside, and the security officers still positioned nearby. Her eyes narrowed almost invisibly. "Why are you standing near the exit?" she asked. Claire answered with complete calm. "Mr. Caldwell believed I did not belong inside." Ethan immediately stepped forward. There appears to have been confusion regarding her reservation credentials. Margaret slowly turned toward him again. Confusion. She repeated the word like it personally offended her. Lily Mercer quietly lowered her eyes behind the front desk. Ethan swallowed. "Our responsibility is to protect the standards of the hotel." Margaret's gaze hardened. "Do you know whose standards built this hotel?" Ethan opened his mouth, but no answer came out. One of the executives standing behind Margaret stepped toward the front desk and quietly handed her a digital tablet. She glanced at the screen for only a second before her jaw tightened. Every complaint, every camera angle, every transaction attempt. The livestream clips already spreading online. Ethan noticed the expression on her face and suddenly looked much less certain of himself. Claire remained silent through all of it. That silence terrified him more than shouting would have. Margaret finally looked back at Claire with visible disappointment in her eyes, though not directed at her. "You were supposed to have dinner upstairs with the acquisition board tonight," she said quietly. Several nearby guests frowned in confusion. Ethan's face lost color. Margaret continued calmly, each word landing heavier than the last. "After all, it is difficult to finalize the purchase of a hotel chain when one of its managers is escorting the future owner into the rain." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed loudly enough to break the silence. Ethan stared at Claire Whitmore as the truth finally crashed into him all at once. Claire looked directly into his eyes, her voice soft enough that everyone still heard it clearly. "Now do you understand who you asked to leave?" No one inside the Grand Celestia Hotel moved after Claire Whitmore spoke those words. The silence spreading through the marble lobby no longer felt awkward. It felt heavy, dangerous. Ethan Caldwell stood frozen beneath the chandelier light, staring at Claire as if his mind refused to accept what he had just heard. Around him, wealthy guests who had laughed earlier slowly lowered their glasses and phones. Even the influencer streaming the entire scene looked uncertain now, her confident smile disappearing while thousands of viewers continued flooding her comments in disbelief. Margaret Holloway stepped forward calmly, removing her rain-covered gloves with measured precision. "Perhaps," she said quietly, We should clarify exactly who Ms. Whitmore is. Ethan swallowed hard. Miss Holloway, if there has been some misunderstanding, I assure you I was simply following hotel protocol. Margaret looked at him with visible disappointment. Protocol, she repeated softly. You publicly humiliated a woman standing under your roof because her coat was not expensive enough for your standards. Ethan opened his mouth again, but no words came. Lily Mercer finally stepped away from the front desk, her nervousness replaced now by something stronger. Honesty. The system identified her as executive-level access from the beginning, she admitted quietly. Every eye in the lobby shifted toward Ethan. Lily's voice trembled slightly, but she continued anyway. I tried warning Mr. Caldwell several times. Ethan immediately turned toward her. That is not what happened. But the confidence in his voice was gone now. Margaret raised one hand, silencing him instantly. Then she looked back toward the gathering crowd. Claire Whitmore is not only the incoming majority owner of the Grand Celestia chain, she said clearly. She is also the woman responsible for funding the employee scholarship program that paid for hospitality education for over 400 hotel workers nationwide. A quiet gasp moved across the lobby. Lily's eyes widened. She had received one of those scholarships herself 2 years earlier after struggling to afford community college tuition. Margaret continued. Most of the employees benefiting from that program never knew her name because she specifically requested anonymity. Several hotel workers standing near the concierge desk exchanged stunned looks. One older bellman slowly removed his cap in silent respect. Claire looked uncomfortable with the attention now. Margaret, she said softly, that was never supposed to become public. Perhaps not, Margaret replied gently. But after tonight, I think people should understand exactly who they chose to judge. Ethan's face had become pale beneath the warm golden lights. He looked at Claire differently now. Not with arrogance. Not even fear. Something worse. Shame. The influencer near the bar quietly lowered her phone camera. Nearby guests who once whispered cruelly now avoided Claire's eyes altogether. The entire social balance of the room had reversed in complete silence. Claire noticed Lily standing nervously nearby and gave her a small, reassuring smile. You spoke up when it mattered, she told her kindly. Lily shook her head. Not soon enough. Claire's expression softened. Courage rarely arrives perfectly timed. The words landed deeply in the room. Even the security officers who had escorted Claire toward the door moments earlier now stood uncomfortably with lowered eyes. Ethan finally stepped forward slowly. Ms. Whitmore, he said carefully, his voice nearly unrecognizable now. I owe you a sincere apology. Claire looked at him quietly for several seconds. You owe more than me, she answered. Ethan froze again. Claire glanced around the enormous luxury lobby filled with expensive watches, designer gowns, polished marble, and suddenly silent people. Tonight was never truly about one woman being embarrassed, she said softly. It was about how quickly human beings decide who deserves dignity. Nobody spoke after that. No glasses clinked. No music played. The same guests who once looked at Claire with amusement now watched her with something entirely different. Respect. The lobby of the Grand Celestia Hotel no longer looked like the same place it had 30 minutes earlier. The arrogance that once floated through the air beside the crystal chandeliers had vanished completely, replaced by an uneasy silence filled with reflection and embarrassment. Guests who had laughed at Claire Whitmore now stood quietly along the marble floor, avoiding eye contact as if ashamed to be recognized as part of the crowd that had watched her humiliation unfold without objection. Ethan Caldwell remained motionless near the velvet rope, his face pale beneath the golden lights while Margaret Holloway reviewed the incident reports on the digital tablet beside him. The livestream clips had already spread across social media, and hotel executives from multiple cities were now contacting corporate offices demanding explanations. Yet Claire showed no interest in revenge. That was what unsettled everyone most. She could have humiliated Ethan publicly. She could have fired him on the spot in front of the entire lobby. Instead, she calmly picked up her old suitcase and turned toward Margaret. No one loses their livelihood tonight, she said softly. Ethan looked up immediately in disbelief. Margaret studied Claire carefully. After what happened here, Claire nodded once. Punishment without reflection changes nothing. The room remained completely silent as Claire slowly walked back toward the center of the lobby. Hotel employees straightened instinctively as she passed. The same security officers who had escorted her toward the door moments earlier now stepped aside respectfully. Claire stopped beside the concierge desk and looked toward Lily Mercer. "How long have you worked here?" Lily hesitated nervously. "Almost 6 months." Claire smiled gently. "And you still chose kindness over fear." Lily lowered her eyes, overwhelmed. Claire turned back toward Margaret. "Promote her into guest relations, training leadership." Lily looked stunned. "Ms. Whitmore, I am not qualified for that." Claire's expression softened again. Compassion qualifies people more than arrogance ever will. Several employees quietly nodded in agreement. Even some of the wealthy guests nearby began clapping softly before stopping awkwardly, unsure if applause belonged in such a moment. Claire then faced the executives gathered near the entrance. "Effective immediately," she said calmly. "Every property under Whitmore Hospitality will begin mandatory dignity and bias training for management teams." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Each word felt heavier than the last. Claire continued, "No guest should ever be evaluated by clothing, accent, age, or appearance before being treated with basic respect." Margaret gave a slow, approving nod. "It will be implemented company-wide." Claire glanced once more across the massive lobby. "And bring back the bakery." Several executives exchanged confused looks. Claire smiled faintly. "The small one that used to stand beside the old concierge desk decades ago. My father loved it here because it felt human." Margaret's expression warmed for the first time all night. "I remember that bakery." Claire nodded. Luxury should never erase warmth. Near the cocktail bar, the influencer quietly lowered her phone completely now. Her earlier confidence had disappeared beneath visible shame. A middle-aged guest who had laughed at Claire earlier slowly approached her. "Ms. Whitmore," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology too." Claire simply answered, "Then remember this feeling the next time someone walks into a room dressed differently than you expected." The man lowered his head without argument. Finally, Claire turned toward Ethan Caldwell. He looked completely broken now, not because of losing authority, but because he finally understood what his behavior had revealed about him in front of everyone. Claire's voice remained calm. "You built your judgment around appearances because it made you feel powerful." Ethan swallowed hard. "I understand that now." Claire studied him quietly for several seconds before speaking one final time. "The tragedy is not that you underestimated me," she said softly. "It is that you stopped seeing ordinary people as worthy of dignity long before tonight." Ethan lowered his eyes toward the marble floor, and for the first time since the evening began, he had no defense left. An hour later, the Grand Celestia Hotel looked softer somehow. The storm outside had eased into a quiet Manhattan drizzle, and warm golden light reflected gently across the marble lobby where tension and arrogance had once filled the air. The velvet rope had been removed from the entrance to the Aurora Lounge, and the piano player had returned to a slow, peaceful melody that drifted through the hotel like a calm apology. Claire Whitmore finally sat beside the tall glass windows overlooking the city skyline, exactly where her father once sat with her decades earlier. The private dining room upstairs had remained available all night, but she chose the smaller corner table near the old photograph instead. A fresh slice of cheesecake rested in front of her beside a cup of hot chocolate prepared from a recipe Margaret Holloway personally ordered recreated from the hotel archives earlier that evening. Claire smiled faintly when she saw it. "He would have loved this," she said quietly. Margaret sat across from her with a gentler expression than before. "Your father would have been proud of you tonight." Claire looked down into the steam rising from the cup. "He taught me that money can build beautiful places," she answered softly. "But only character makes people feel welcome inside them." Nearby, Lily Mercer nervously approached the table carrying a small folder in her hands. "Ms. Whitmore," she said carefully, "Human Resources asked me to deliver this personally." Claire opened the folder and smiled. Inside was Lily's official promotion paperwork into the new hospitality leadership program Claire had announced earlier. Lily looked overwhelmed. "I still cannot believe this is happening." Claire reached gently for the folder and handed it back to her. "Then promise me something," she said kindly. Lily nodded immediately. "When you are the one training future employees, teach them to notice the people everyone else ignores." Lily's eyes watered slightly as she whispered, "I will." Across the lobby, Ethan Caldwell slowly approached the table alone. He no longer looked like the sharply confident manager who once controlled the room with arrogance. His tie had been loosened slightly, and exhaustion rested heavily across his face. He stopped several feet away from Claire before speaking. "Ms. Whitmore," he said quietly, "I received notice from corporate. I have been removed from guest management pending review." Claire simply listened. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly. "I deserve it." No one interrupted him. No one defended him. Ethan looked around the lobby slowly, taking in the employees he had overlooked for years, the guests who once admired his authority, and the hotel he believed belonged only to people who looked wealthy enough to impress him. "Tonight forced me to see something ugly about myself," he admitted. "I spent so long protecting appearances that I forgot hospitality was supposed to protect people." Claire studied him silently for a moment. Then she gave a small nod. "The important thing is whether you remember that lesson after the embarrassment fades." Ethan swallowed hard. "I will." For the first time all evening, his apology sounded completely honest. Claire did not punish him further. She did not humiliate him in return. She simply allowed the silence to settle naturally between them. Outside the tall glass windows, the rain slowed almost completely while New York shimmered beneath thousands of city lights. Inside the Grand Celestia Hotel, employees moved differently now. Softer, more aware. Guests greeted staff with unexpected kindness. The atmosphere itself seemed changed by what had happened there that night. Claire finally lifted the cup of hot chocolate gently in both hands, her reflection glowing faintly against the glass while the city stretched endlessly beyond her. And that night, everyone inside the Grand Celestia Hotel remembered that dignity does not need wealth to be recognized. It only needs someone humble enough to see it.